everyone, and welcome to the Podcast by ARMY podcast, where we talk about BTS, ARMY, fandom, and research. We are your co-hosts, Dr. Kate Ringland and
Jhertau Her. And today we have a guest. Would they like to introduce themselves?
Yeah, thank you. Hi, everybody. My name is Zuzu. I'm so excited to be here.
Thank you for being here, Zuzu. We're excited to have you. Zuzu, would you like to give some context of who you are before we jump into these questions and topics?
Yeah, thank you. You might know me as Zuzu on Twitter. Yes, I am involved with Army for Palestine, or A4P affectionately. I am one of the Palestinian armies, working on fundraising, awareness, and divestment work with the organization. We are a group of Palestinian admins and a like-minded team. When we got together in November, we really just wanted to do our best for our people and see where it would go, and start with fundraising, start with using Army's big voice to see what we could do to get the money out where it needed to be with fundraisers for folks that we knew in Gaza, in Palestine. And yeah, it's grown from there with just ideas and knowledge of what it means to be BTS Army in like a big space in a really pivotal time where collective liberation is a huge deal. And so we've further explored what that means. And I've been really grateful and blessed to be a part of this team. Alhamdulillah.
Thank you so much for sharing all of that about yourself. Kate and I are really excited to have you on this podcast. This has been in the works for a long time.
yes,
But now we're here.
Yes.
We've made it.
Very
And
exciting.
yeah, with all of these podcast episodes where we invite a guest, we always start with this one question. And we're going to keep it going. We're going to start it with you as well. So, Zuzu, how did you get into BTS?
Thanks for asking. So fun. So one of my best friends in high school is from South Korea. Met her in middle school, and she into K music. We're both teenage girls. She's like getting me into like pop music from her country, which was super exciting. So got me into like very much the classics of that era about, gosh, 10 years ago. And then, yeah, maybe a little bit more than 10 years ago now that I'm thinking about it. I'm like, how old am I? You can check that in my bio. And yeah, we were super close. And then when she graduated, she moved back to Korea. Her family's from Busan. Now she lives in Seoul. And yeah, we just stayed connected. And before we graduated, she ended up being like, hey, there's this new boy group that's coming out. And she would always tune me into the new groups. And I was like, heck yeah, I'll take all of your music recommendations. Super great person and really great sense of taste. So of course she was into BTS. And yeah, I started listening to them in their debut. And I was a very, I want to say casual listener, but I was a listener. And then I was a BTS listener and enjoyer before I joined online ARMY spaces. I'm very, I don't want to say new to ARMY, but new to Twitter sphere in general, and just not in the spotlight at all. Still really not, but very much was a listener, enjoyer, appreciator of lyrics, music. It was really great because I got to get like friends and my partner into BTS as well. And yeah, it carried me through like college and my working life after that and continuing now. And now I'm just like more involved. I think that after COVID had begun in 2020, it gave me a lot of time to collectively reintroduce myself to online fandom spaces in general. And then that's how my journey to online ARMY Twitter began. But yeah, my BTS experience was from my very dear friend. Thanks, Hyojin.
Yay.
That's so cute. Oh my god. It really really goes to show that the love of BTS is so intertwined with community and how we share that with each other. I got into BTS because of my cousins. So I
Nice.
also see you from that front where it's like someone recommends it and you're just like, oh, okay. And then it's now your whole life. So yeah, as we get into BTS, we also obviously have to talk about some really important things as well, like talking about Palestine, for instance. Like Zuzu, that's why you came onto this podcast to come speak with us. So, what are some major points or maybe context you want to give to the situation and like things you want to really talk about while you're here?
Yeah. First of all want to say I really appreciate the space for Palestinian ARMY specifically, but I think Palestinians in general, and whether we're diaspora or not, I think what we really want to do is just uplift the most marginalized amongst our community. We have been ongoing with this piece of the occupation's genocide since October. Probably some of the most challenging parts of any of our lives have been happening. And it's really hard to contextualize that feeling into media appropriate words. It's very challenging. It's something that is just, I don't know, it's very haunting. It's challenging to live with that in yourself. We have this history of 76 years of occupation by the Zionist entity. We have then now plus 100 years war on Palestine, if you include the British Mandate period, the colonization of the British Empire, who then handed that off to the Zionist entity, as Rashid Khalidi states in the book 100 Years War on Palestine, which is a really great, actually, introduction book to the genocide and the occupation. I recommend everyone to check it out. Yeah, so I think that we hold that in our bodies and we all hold that in our existence. And epigenesis is real. We hold the historical trauma in our bodies, whether we're diaspora or not, no matter what generation we are. And I think for me, it's really important to help be a liaison. I have the opportunity, I have the privilege to come and speak with you guys. And I want to do that in a way that's responsible. And I want to do it in a way that supports my people, my family's story, but also the ones of my friends that I'm working with in the Army for Palestine project, maintaining our Army friends in Palestine's like stories and love and dignity. I think that's the most important thing, is just like sharing like how serious this liberation movement is, how it's interconnected with other liberation movements in the Caribbean and Africa and other pieces of Asia and in indigenous territories and places. Yeah, I want this to be an opportunity to share resource, to get help to folks who need it most, those most marginalized communities that I mentioned. And I want to share what we've been doing and why we think it's important.
Yeah, and thank you so much for being here once again. We hope this can be a platform to have some really good conversation. Before we start this podcast, too, you wanted to talk about something in specific, actually. Did you want to go into that?
Yeah, thank you. I appreciate this space. Yeah, something that I want to talk about specifically because I think it's the foundation of all that we're talking about right now, and certainly conversations had online within the Army Twitter space or even just online in general. But it's something that I think that unless you're a Palestinian, you're not super introduced to until you dive into the movement. And that is Al-Thawabet, or like the principles. And basically, it's the set of principles that we as a collective community and people ask all other members of our community and our allies to follow. So if you're going to be for the liberation of the people of Palestine, liberation for the nation of Palestine itself, we'll ask you to adhere to Al-Thawabet. And reading here from a really great source from Palestine Athletica, which they have a bunch of really great funds. Please go follow them. Please contribute to their campaigns. They state, and this is state of the never-changing principles or constants of Palestinian liberation. They represent the core of a national Palestinian state and constitution. Al-Thawabet were written as a reference for the liberation movement and a reminder of what liberation is fighting for. And here are the movements and principles. I know I've shared this a lot online. I think it's really great to reintroduce them as a framework. So the first one is reject all forms of colonialism. both in Palestine and anywhere around the world, denounce all forms of normalization. So normalization, we could see, can be pop culture normalization. It can be political normalization. It can be like in every facet of your life. We ask to reject all forms of normalization for occupation of Palestine and also for liberation movements around the world. This one specifically, we fight for the liberation of Palestine from the river to the sea, with Al-Quds as the eternal capital of one Palestinian state. We uphold the right of return for all Palestinians. We preserve Palestinian self-determination / self-autonomy. You do not need to become a spokesperson on behalf of Palestinians if you are not Palestinian. Uplift Palestinian voices instead. Support all forms of resistance against Zionism, including armed resistance, and refuse any sort of compromise in the demands for liberation. So wanted to state all those out because I think they're such an important framework. I know I talk a lot and I yap a lot on Twitter about we need to like be radicalizing ourselves, and radical work is with love and empathy. And I think these principles were created by our elders in the Palestinian community with love and respect and affection for our people, and I think with all colonized people. And so I want to lay them down as a framework of not only our conversation, but everything that Army for Palestine does. Is we're pretty transparent that we don't really accept normalization. We don't really accept compromises. We want to push people in this community to be radical, and we want to do it with love. So that's why I wanted to share that before we began diving in deeper. Yeah.
And we will post links in the description of this episode for all of this so that if people want to find out more, they can go to that after they listen to this.
Yeah.
Yeah, and thank you so much for sharing more about like framework and how we should think about things. Because specifically, like when we talk about things like normalization, that has come up a lot within our own space of, okay, how do we tackle normalization?
Yeah.
Because normalization is really at the core of just a lot of our lives, where like Zionist entities fund so much of the things we consume and the things that we exist under. And especially right now, like with the boycott, we're having a lot of that type of conversation. As we go into this, do you want to talk maybe about like divestment and boycotting and what that kind of looks like and what that means for Palestine?
So the divestment campaign and the boycott. So boycotts are meant to put pressure on an entity through money. Basically, most basic form of that definition. We see this in domestic boycotts in your home country, wherever you're. We see this in just like general boycotts. For example, we're seeing boycotts being called by Congolese people from the Democratic Republic of Congo of buying new phone technology to preserve the dignity of the lives there, to fight against injustice and decrease the demand for supply for the genocide of folks going on there. We see that as a national movement for countries specifically. And then in terms of Palestine, we see boycotting through the lens of the BDS movement, which is the Boycott, Divest, Sanction movement that was founded a little bit over under 20 years ago. And they primarily look towards things specifically that are consumer related that the Zionist entity gains funds, gains intelligence from, monetary compensation, government assistance, all of these things. So we use BDS as a guide. BDS is like the base level. So for example, if you have to like make a minimum number of hours at work, say it's 1,700 in a year. That's the minimum. You don't want to be anywhere under that. You want to ideally be above that. And so I think that's it's a good example to be like, BDS is a great start. We want you to follow the BDS boycotts. So that's your organic boycotts, checking out their divestment targets. There are organic boycotts and their pressure targets. There's 4 categories, which there's an infographic that my hosts can link that's the beginning of it. We ask folks to go beyond and do their own research. And that's why there's been like boycott apps produced. It's always really important to check the validity and updatedness of those. But we do ask you to go further. We ask, this is a great start. We think about things like Sabra hummus that's on the boycott list. We look at different gas stations that are on the boycott list, not only for Palestine, but also for Sudan and boycotting the UAE and their genocide in Sudan. Yeah, so I think that it's helpful to put it in that context because then there's a financial versus a cultural boycott. And BDS kind of does this well because the BDS committee is the financial piece mostly. It encapsulates everything, but they're focused on that. And then PACB, it's the Palestinian Campaign for the Academic and Cultural Boycott of Israel. PACB, cultural side. Incredible.
To clarify as well, PACB is under BTS.
Yes, PACB is under BDS.
If PACB says something about boycotting and about what is actually happening with Palestine, they are under BDS, and that is like in conjunction with the BDS movement.
Correct.
All right. Good to clarify that.
Clarifying that for some people on Twitter is what we're doing.
This is correct. And this has been the case for over 20 years. They have always been in that. So we'll see a lot. So cultural boycotting is really historically important for things like the divestment of the apartheid of South Africa, like that. Big thing, they have academic and cultural because the academic piece is the divestment of universities. And we saw that very much and continue to see that push with student encampments, hoping for the divestment of universities, because that's a huge piece. And so what the students at Columbia University started was actually a bit of a like mirror call from PACB, and they responded to that in conjunction with obviously things that were going on internally on their campuses, and then the waterfall flowed. But I think what's so important to talk about with PACB and the BDS movement is our divestment campaign with Army for Palestine kind of fits into both. So I'll explain that. So right now we're in a boycott of all money-making property of Hive labels. So any group under Hive that is money-making for that, their label, their company, so merch, music, movies, concerts, anything the company gets money for, that's a financial boycott, specifically a financial boycott, because that is going, and it is an organic one started by this community because of not only Scooter Braun's ties to Zionism, very specifically, he's like a Hasbarist spokesperson, specifically, but there's also general ties to Zionism within production of music and other things. So things that have Zionist features, Zionist production, and I think just generally the deal with UMG and Zionist labels in music in general. It's a huge influence in that piece of the entertainment world. So that is a financial boycott, loud and clear. Cultural boycott has to do, like the academic one, things that are invested directly in the settler colony, the Zionist settler colony, Israel. So what that looks like from the academic standpoint, again, divestment from money, research, everything going into Israeli life. With cultural, it's people who make and produce concerts in the settler colony in Israel. And this extends to things like movies, shows, anything that is shown on occupied Palestinian land deserves a cultural boycott. So, for example, since I'm an ARMY, this is my reference. The movie D-Day that was shown in the settler colony of Israel. That is an organic cultural boycott target, and one that has generally been endorsed by Pakpi BDS movement. The entirety of the Olympics is another thing, a very cultural world thing that the settler colony of Israel's citizens, quote unquote, are allowed by the International Olympic Committee to participate in. That's why we boycott the Olympics. That's why we ask the athletes to show solidarity. We ask the torchbearers to show solidarity because it is a cultural, phenomenal boycott. So those are the definitions, as like direct as I can make them, and why important. Yes, we're performing a financial boycott of Hive labels with our divestment campaign because we do not want these artists that we've all come to know and love to be associated with this. That's financial. And then we don't want our artists associated with the settler colony of Israel in general. That's the cultural piece. And I think that's probably the best way to describe it.
It feels straightforward when you say it like that.
Yeah, it is pretty straightforward. Even what we're seeing with the new girl group Cat's Eye, and how there's so many Zionists in the production aspect of their music.
Yep.
And the group itself is under Hive America, which Scooter Braun is the CEO of, and boycotting them and what that looks like. Like, all of this is so interconnected. And when you say it so clearly, it makes sense.
I'm glad that it does. And I think that's such an important thing to bring up as well, is that Cat's Eye being directly under Hive America. So yes, targeting Hive America, but then realizing that's all interconnected with Hive labels in general, which is why the divestment committee exists. That's why they exist. And something that I can think of as comparable to that with an organic boycott is actually probably the university movement, actually, because what happens is, and this is a pretty historical precedent with the Vietnam War, South African apartheid, any other movement where students are at the forefront of some kind of divestment with universities, because we've, in the world, in society, decided that university institutes are going to be arms dealers. Yeah, harsh but true. I think what's really great with the students is that they did their research. So not only obviously Columbia University students did their research of, okay, how is this university invested? Oh, it's a hedge fund for Zionism. And then you look, and then the other students, so the University of New York, University of California, Humboldt, the UC system, any other pretty much major state university in the United States. I'm thinking of even college like University College Cork in Ireland, like abroad. We've got other abroad places that I know that there's been like Japanese universities, Korean universities, everywhere on the globe. Students do their research, figure out if there's hidden investments in the settler colony of Israel. And they do that research. They're like, there is. Let's figure out our demands. That's basically what we're doing with the Hive boycott. Hive America, we realize, okay, Scooter Braun is the CEO of Hive America. Then we do our research and we're like, how much is he invested in all of these other groups, all of the other subsects of Hive labels? And the answer is all of them.
Yeah, that one is not so hidden. It's pretty much right. You don't have to look too far.
As much research needed.
He's literally got his hands on everything. It's so gross. It's so gross.
Yeah, it is so gross. Because we see it like even like how post Scooter Braun, how many more Zionists are in music production or
That's
even
truly-
featured in albums, where it's like, we can specifically talk about this, but like with Jimin's Muse album, what's her
Mhm.
name? The lady that was
Sophia
featured.
Carson.
Yeah, there's no musical kind of cohesion with that collaboration. But seeing the way that music production and just how the music has been treated post Scooter Braun is so strange. That's the thing. And it really goes to show that he is trying to push this certain agenda into the company and within all aspects of the company. And you can't stop it by just doing, oh, don't do it. You have to actually take action to do it.
Yeah, exactly. Because the only language that these people speak is money.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And with that, one of the actions we're taking is boycotting, but
Yep.
also, Zuzu, you wanted to talk about as well other actions we can take to actually help the people in Palestine too. Do you want to elaborate on that?
Yeah, I think with the divestment campaign and the boycotting campaign, that's a huge part of our movement. We obviously are being the forefront work of encouraging people to boycott, withholding our money, but then also demanding change through protest action and means. But we also, our first and foremost goal is to help our people. And like you shared, this is the first thing that we did and the biggest thing that we continue to do. So the first thing that I would love to highlight is actually our most recent ongoing fundraising campaign that actually intertwines with the boycott. It's really awesome. We have just introduced it with the rest of the Hive divestment team. That's with Carrots for Palestine. It's with Ungene for Palestine, Clover for Palestine, all of our Hive divestment groups. There's more than that. We're a pretty big group, which is really exciting, by the way. It's really great to have us all be together in the Hive label boycotts and the divestment campaign. But we decided, okay, we can do something with getting people excited about, like, when people are excited about a comeback or work that their favorite artists are putting in, we can ask them to be mindful of their consumerism, and you can still be excited for the hard work that your artists are putting in and the craft that they're doing. But then you can support in other ways that aren't monetary or that don't give money. And you can use that money. We have set it up that you can donate directly to the PCRF, the Palestinian Children Relief Fund, which is a trusted organization that works both in Gaza and the West Bank, the occupied West Bank, to help children and has been helping for several decades. They are members of the community. They are allies of the community. They work on the ground in Palestine. A really trusted organization that helps children. They've helped evacuate several children on emergency in Gaza during the current piece of this genocide. And when people go to Army for Palestine's page or any of the Hive divestment pages, any of the For Palestine pages, they can click directly on the link or the QR code, and it takes them directly to the PCRF's donation fund. And then you can donate to them, and then they'll show how much like the goal is for that comeback, or like you can share like, I'm doing this for this comeback. Or so we've already had folks bring it in and they're like, this is for Hope on the Street, or this is for my favorite artists, this, or like this solo debut, or like anything that's going on in other fandoms, even beyond Army. It's a way to directly do that. And it follows our continued protocol of not collecting donations or funds ourselves as Army for Palestine, the liaison, the facilitators of that fundraising directly to organizations. So that's the big one that we want to promote right now, because it's a very fabulous idea. We're so grateful to the creative minds on our teams for that. And we're excited that it follows in the footsteps of all these previous donation drives that we have done. So I'm thinking of our last very major one for Falesta, or like Palestine Festa. We really loved sharing and pushing for campaigns for family and friends that we know of our community. And I say our community, Palestinian Army community, as well as just other folks that we know, like our friends and family. And then starting from the very beginning with donating to Care for Gaza, we donating to pious projects for their menstrual product campaign for menstruating people in Palestine, as well as maternity care for others and natal care for babies in Palestine, in Gaza specifically. Oh my goodness, what else have we done? We've done a lot. Just wonderful to know that this money is getting somewhere to help our people. We connected with our really dear friends at Learn to Liberate, L2L, with their Ramadan campaigns to feed and just like food and shelter needs and drives. So many of our campaigns have been for direct aid. So GoFundMes of Palestinians evacuating Gaza both before and after Rafah's border closed, because we know that the border will be reopened and so many people need to get out. And so we not only, of course, promote the Palestinian armies who are in community with us, whether they're in Egypt right now and wanting to reunite the rest of their family, or they're in diaspora and they're the caretakers of their family and they're trying to help the rest of their family reunite, or if they are like army currently in Gaza and they're trying to get their families out. I think it's really a testament to see how many young people, primarily young, like femme identifying people in Palestine who are army and who are the sponsors of their family trying to leave Gaza. I think it's people that are in community with us very organically. And I don't know, it's just been like really an honor to connect with my people in a way that's through both shared interest and identity, and how we support them through that. I think direct mutual aid is the most important piece that we do. Trusted organizations are great, but I think every non-Western culture and community knows that you can't trust big Western organizations unless they have been invited into the community, like the PCRF. And that's why we give directly to our people. That's why we give the GoFundMes. That's why we give directly to Care for Gaza, directly to our friends, Ihab and Ahmed, who are in Gaza or in Egypt and have family. And that's who we give to. That's who we promote for Ramadan, for Easter, for Christmas, for any of our holidays, and all the ties in between. I think it's a really important way. So we ask everyone to continue to support these campaigns, even if they're already done. You always can support a GoFundMe. You can always support the QR code for several army who are in Palestine, army folks who are in Palestine. There's so many of our direct family and friends who are affected and who have their own connections to fundraisers, trusting the Palestinians in your community in our community that when we share a fundraiser, and yeah, please share what you can, please boost them. We take care of each other. And I think that's what we learned most about our fundraising work is we really take care of each other. We get each other to this goal, and we support folks and meet them where they're at and help them with what they're asking for. We don't cast judgment upon that. And so it's been really cool to see as like Army for Palestine has grown and how we share like resources and share what we're doing and using our platform to spread the word of what people need in terms of fundraising. We've also had the honor of teaming up with both Operation Olive Branch and Palestine Astika, two really great movements that are helping underfunded Palestinian campaigns for GoFundMes, for evacuation, for survival needs, for tents, for medical necessities, for babies. They help on the ground get those funds and get what they need, which is really awesome to work with those folks. Palestine Astika is Palestinian-led, and then Operation Olive Branch has a community of really cool allies. So both of them are great to check out. Another fundraiser I really want to mention is the Municipality of Gaza's water fundraiser, which we will share. It is probably one of the most crucial fundraisers that we have shared and sponsored before, as well as several other groups, because you can't talk about the spread of disease and pandemic, basically epidemic in the area without sharing the lack of clean water supply. So the water pipes have been targeted in bombings and airstrikes, and the municipality of Gaza wants to rebuild them, often at risk of their own workers, as we've seen martyred workers. And so whenever you see on your timeline young children who are dealing with skin conditions because of unclean water, dealing with sicknesses because of unclean water, you say, oh my goodness, this is the reality. This is what's happening to our people. And it's like, what can you do? You can donate to the municipality of Gaza's water fundraiser, because that's crucial. That is a direct action you can take to help mitigate this issue. So I think that's probably one of the most important fundraisers to highlight. I've highlighted a lot. I hope that's enough for everyone of what we've done and what we've worked with. And there's obviously so much more and so much more that we want to help with. And we'll continue to do.
Yeah, and there's also, did you want to share about the infographic for the armies as well?
Yeah. I shared a little bit before, but I want to highlight that there are infographics that we'll share here too that have, I believe it's 9 Palestinian armies who are those folks who are sponsoring their families, and they are what we're trying to share in every place. So online, on Twitter, on Instagram, on TikTok, on Facebook, every social media platform you have, and then also printing them out and putting them around your town, putting them in the community centers that you frequent, at protests you go to, at demonstrations, anything that you do in your everyday life, or for Palestine, or for Sudan, or for Congo, or for any other group community action that you're working for. If you're on Army social media, find the paper and print a bunch out and give them to people. And that's how we get fundraisers checked off of people's lists.
So thanks for sharing all that amazing information. And now let's talk about how hard it's actually been to get to this place. We've been talking about it on the podcast a lot.
Yeah.
From our perspective, the struggles that have been happening.
The bar is low, but every day it gets lower.
Yeah. No, exactly.
We can't even see the bar anymore. That's how far it's gone.
I do appreciate the observation like that by allies like yourself, because it's very like, is this really happening?
It's out of body to see the things people say.
Yeah, no, the constant, we've been doing that in DMs and stuff, being like, do you see this? Are you seeing is this real? Yeah.
Yeah. I think, gosh, I don't even know how I would begin. It's a lot, as you can, I'm sure you can infer by body language and just our shared experience. And of course, what we share as Palestinians in this community, in this space, was even incredibly tempered for what we think and feel, I think. Yeah, I think everyone needs a massive reality check that we are experiencing all of this while being in connection with family and family friends every day and seeing them die. Yeah. I don't know how much more slap in the face it gets than that. I think about the things that me and the other admins, the other A4P admins have gone through, as well as the other For Palestine account admins have gone through, as well as our friends in our Palestinian ARMY community. And it's just the juxtaposition of people are like, oh, if you stopped responding to an argument, the other person has won. Oftentimes, if we go days without responding, it's because someone in the family has been martyred. And I'm just going to let everyone sit with that. Because, yeah, we will stand up for ourselves. We're strong and resilient people who want to represent ourselves well, with this harassment and stepping outside the norm of what society says we should behave as. We're a people that are survivors of genocide and historical trauma and occupation. And I think that not a lot of people realize that when we do go quiet, it's because another tragedy has happened. And that's happening almost every day. And I don't even have to explain that much. I just really want people to sit with that, the humanity of that. Yeah. I really just want people to sit with that. It's beyond fandom. That's our lives. That's our real lives. That's our families' lives. It's our families' deaths. Our friends. Yeah. And all of the admins have been personally affected, and they're all allowed to tell their own stories in whatever way we want. I've shared some of my own. To my knowledge, I don't have living family left in Gaza. I do in the West Bank, but we were a separated family post Nakba. And that's like the reality. That's the reality we live in. That's the reality that a lot of us have lived with for years and then now for months, this section of the genocide. So I think I just want people to sit with that, is that there's so much nuance of, which I know we'll talk about later. Of, are you seeing this? This is what this person has said. This is what this person has done, either to Army for Palestine as an entity or any Palestinian that they see on the timeline personally. And there's that, but then there's also collectively the reality of this is what happens. We're not superheroes. We're human. We're just people going through a lot of shit. And I think I really relate to other mutuals that I have or other people I follow who come from other colonized nations or other nations facing genocide. And I think they've had similar experiences. And although camaraderie is really helpful to talk about, it's just very hard. It's wow, all of us are really dealing with the same unempathetic, unsympathetic people in this world. And that's very hard to sit with.
Yeah, it has been really hard and it continues to be hard. And as we're talking about displacement as well, my family has also experienced that as people who are Hmong, or an ethnic minority from Southeastern Asia. And like in the Palestinian struggle, I see my own people struggle too. And I feel like so much community and solidarity with Palestinian people because we are all just victims of colonization and colonial powers trying to harm us and trying to take our lands, take our resources, when really we are all people. And I feel so much for you right now. Just
I do too. Thank you. Thank you for that.
And we can say it too. I feel like we're skirting around a lot of the kind of bad things that have happened in the past couple months. But like, let's be real here. Palestinian and pro-Palestinian Twitter accounts on Army Twitter have been suspended. There have been attempts to suspend Care for Gaza, to suspend the accounts of Palestinian people who are raising money for their GoFundMes and for their families. And there's so much violence against Palestinian people and the pro-Palestine movement on Army Twitter that is unfound in other fandom spaces and other online spaces, and is so harmful to the space itself. I don't know. Kate has talked about this before, where like how this has disrupted just our community itself. Kate, do you want to talk more about that?
This does not a good community make, right? We can't be a community if people are going through this and not getting the support they need and instead just facing more violence. And that's just, you can't have a community in a space like that.
Yeah. And suspending accounts is violence. It is policing. It is silencing. And I'm so grateful for Zuzu being here and wanting to speak with us and wanting to speak on this platform. And I'm so grateful you're here. And just, but the way that so many people have systematically within Army Twitter been silencing Palestinian people, it hurts, honestly. And I feel like there's a lot of things we can't say and we don't say, but it does hurt. And it has continuously harmed this community and pushed us to where we are today.
Yeah, I agree. I think it's been really difficult to see friends and people who have become like family, fellow country people, fellow Palestinians. And a lot of us are like, okay, yeah, it's all for our people. It's all for our people in Gaza. It's all for our people in all of occupied Palestine. But I think that the dehumanization of the Palestinian people is not new. Very unfortunately, it is, I think, a disgrace that it's made it to Army Twitter, if I can say boldly.
Second that.
I think as a Palestinian I am a Palestinian before all else. I am a human, I am a Palestinian. Yes, I am an army, but I am a Palestinian first and foremost. Pretty sure that's literally the pinned on my account. Not to mirror myself from many months ago, but that's still true. We all feel that way because who you are as your core, especially as you were talking to together being Indigenous Asians, we feel our land, even in diaspora, we feel our land most first. Like our people, our humans are our land. That is fundamental to our identity, to our existence. And I never see anything being more important than that. And so to then connect it to this is what I feel like that the attacks are coming, and what for us is we are being asked to put an identity that is not our Palestinian identity above being Palestinian, I think is the root of this harassment, this violence, as you so greatly put it. Violence can take so many forms. Yeah, I think plain and simple is what's been going on is violence to us. We see it in our kind of lowest moments in the news cycles almost, or the information we receive, I should say. The attempt for the suspension of Care for Gaza happened almost simultaneously back in February when the Super Bowl was on and the first Rafah tent massacre happened. Not only are these horrible things happening, but there's always atrocities all the time, but they seem to really line up with or happen simultaneously or close to when really horrific things are happening in our community. And sometimes that's a coincidence, sometimes that's not. I fully believe that there are paid Hasbarists in Army Twitter. It's a huge community. There's no way there's not. Who those people are, we don't know. That's why we're like, you don't engage with the Zionists. You don't engage with Zionist talking points. That's literally part of the principles. But I think it's hard to want to care for community and be like, oh my goodness, this is happening. That we do need to fight against the potential suspension for Care for Gaza, a mutual aid on the ground organization. But we're also having to take time for ourselves to process the news of the tent massacre in Rafah, the flower massacre, all of these atrocities that have happened over the past 10, almost 11 months of genocide. And I think that, yeah, I've seen the suspension of my friends, our beloveds, our community's accounts gone. If they're in Gaza, if they're in Egypt, suspended now, and they're like, I need someone to pass on my GoFundMe. We see that happening outside of Army Twitter by Zionists. We've seen people's accounts suspended by Zionists, and then someone else has to take up the mantle. That's what we're doing within our community. We are a microcosm of the larger Zionist entity world. And just think about that for a minute. I think it's really harmful for the general public to maybe perceive Army as a harmful or quote unquote Zionist fandom. And I really we don't want that for our community. I think it's very hard as a Palestinian who is supported by other Palestinians, who supports other Palestinians in our community, and also who is supported and supports allies in the movement. It's hard to contextualize all these things that have happened because there's so many examples happening every single day of, oh, which terrible thing has happened now? literally everything under the sun. Everything under the sun. So if you want to give even more context and examples that you want to talk about, we absolutely can. But I think that for me, I don't know if it's a trauma response, but it's all kind of a blur. But we absolutely have it all documented by allies and everything. Actually, the biggest thing that we do is we document. We have friends who document, screenshot document, and send to the account, the Anti-Zionist Genocide Archive, that account, who's compiling from all parts of the internet. So from published news articles that are explicitly Zionist in nature, to Hasbarist campaigns, to fandom, or like general spaces on like political Twitter, or really an account that's known on Instagram for being super Zionist. And we have people reporting that in Army spaces as well. So our friends and allies are doing that work as well, which we're super grateful for, because archiving, so the 10th step of genocide is denialism. And by archiving that, that's a good step to fight against. So I think that's a big, important piece.
Yeah. And we've seen the pushback of that in certain Army spaces. I think that we've seen it here, even with this podcast, of people pushing back and realizing, I think, that their behavior is being seen and witnessed. And I think that that's part of the anti-intellectualism we've seen of them, like realizing that people are observing their behavior and are actually recording it in some fashion. And I think it's been really interesting to see in some of the spaces a doubling down of the behavior and of this kind of pushback and policing, because they're having this realization that they're being actually archived in several different ways, because it's not just that, but also in all these, hello world, I am an academic and I am seeing what you are doing and I'm recording it. The realization that they are in fact doing all of this in a very public place. I think the fact that there is no self-awareness or reflection of the behavior that they're exhibiting in these very public places is wild to me.
Yeah, that's their bed, lie in it.
I know, exactly. It's the choices it's truly the choices they are making right now.
Yeah.
Because all of these online actions, they all have real world implications.
Yes.
And a lot of these people we're talking specifically about Army Twitter, but even just in online spaces, they're saying a lot of these things and thinking there will be no consequences and that there will be no one who will look back at what they've said. But we've documented it all, and we are going to be looking at it all, and we will talk about it, and we will not let people silence us because they're harassing us online. That's like Kate and I have alluded to papers, to articles, to things we were writing, but all of this attempt to silence us does not silence us.
Yeah.
It just proves that we are speaking about something really important and that there will be pushback, but we will prevail through that pushback. Yeah. Even with Palestine and with Palestinian people, like every single time, like just this past week, a really prominent Palestinian account, like a Palestinian ARMY, her account got suspended. And that's been really hard because her platform was used to push GoFundMe, was used to push fundraising, but we rebuilt and we sustain and we continue on. And I think that's something that a lot of these people have never seen before, because we are going to be continuing on. We're not going to stop. That's the thing.
Yeah. I think there's such a good point to be made there that fascism and fascistic tendencies are very weak when you pull them apart. And when you continue to fight and threaten them, they lash out in very angry, spiteful ways. And to that, I pull back something that I've said in a lot of questions I've received for different articles and things, and that's will continue being loud. And I say that on behalf of Army for Palestine. Army for Palestine, the entity that is us, we will continue being loud in direct counteraction to this. And I think that especially when we see our own, specifically, I go back to the beginning where I said our goal is to help our most marginalized in our community, in our Palestinian community. And right now, that is the folks directly under genocide in Gaza right now. And when people who had previously been in our circle, our community in Army Twitter, are directly harassing people actually in Gaza who might not even have any relation to Army, but understand the power and influence that these spaces hold, and our friends and family and all these people, when they are being directly harassed on behalf of whoever, because on behalf of Army for Palestine, if they are trying to silence us, if they're trying to silence Army for Palestine, and they're doing it by way of attacking our friends and family and people we know and love in Gaza under genocide, a tactic to try and make us shut up. Oh, this will all go away if we attack who's most vulnerable to them. It's calculated. I absolutely believe it's calculated. They don't make a mistake by targeting someone in Gaza. They know what they're doing. But that's threatening the people we're trying to protect the most. So of course we're going to continue, again, to be loud and be like, no, look at what's this happening. We archive it, we account for it. We're like, this is what's happening. This is who's being attacked. And then we rally around them. And we're like, okay, this is happening. Let's donate more money to their GoFundMe. Let's amplify them more. This is happening because they're seeing something that's violating the BDS movement, for example. And another dehumanization tactic is to treat Palestinians like we don't know anything because of maybe language barrier or something like that. It's an incredible dehumanization tactic and infantilization tactic. People on the ground in Gaza share internet space with us, see this happening, are like, Palestinians in Palestine made BDS, like they made those tenets. And they know that they're being violated. Of course, they're going to say something about it. And they do get attacked for it. And we're like, no, actually, they have their principles. They're not compromising, even in the face of airstrikes, in the face of genocide. They know why movements happen as they happen. They've lived it. We as Palestinians have lived it. And we're like, okay, if our most marginalized among us can still talk and amplify boycotts and movements that they want to see happen in solidarity with them, to have people keep talking about them, our duty, I think we think as Army for Palestine in particular, like our duty is to back that up and do the same and protect them, because those are our marginalized people.
Yeah, we see with whenever these targeted attacks happen, we can say it's targeted attacks because they are. Like these people are looking for when people mess up, when people have an imperfectly worded tweet to attack them. Like what you talked about with language barriers. And we see like how dehumanizing it is where someone's taken out of context or taken like where people say that someone says something that they didn't actually say, where they're trying to recontextualize what someone said. And it's a purposeful targeting of the most vulnerable, the most marginalized, the most emotionally vulnerable, where sometimes like I see like Palestinian people trying to talk about the hardships of what is happening to their families and the frustration that comes with that. And then we see targeted attacks by people who we should name them as Zionists. They are not just Zionist compliant or Zionist complicit. They are Zionists when they attack a Palestinian person like that. And from the perspective of someone who's pro-Palestinian, seeing that, it is so clear just the way it is happening and that how targeted it is, and how we'll see like someone have not that much interaction with a lot of tweets, like a Palestinian person talking about things. And then suddenly it's like this onslaught of harassment. And it's frustrating, honestly. It's so frustrating and so unfair. And I want to be angry, I want to be mad, but on the timeline, you're trying to be very cordial about it. But do these people even deserve being cordial, being calm about it when they come so aggressively and so angrily against Palestinian people. You have to play respectability politics and be polite with these people who basically tell you to KYS. What's even the point at that point?
Yeah.
Sorry, it's frustrating. It
No,
really
you're
is.
good.
I was just thinking about like how much my own interactions and engagement and the ways in which I choose or choose not to engage on Twitter has changed so dramatically
Yeah.
in the last several months. Just
Yeah.
like just that. And it's something I've always been fairly aware of, just as somebody who's been studying this space anyway. But just if I engage with this, is it worth basically drawing more attention to it? Versus do I allow this to just sit there where other people can see it? It's like that balance of, it's not even being cordial, but the idea of if you push back, it starts a fight, or it will bring attention to, or it'll put it on other people's timelines, or it'll versus like how do the idea of you want to be in solidarity and show support, especially if it's somebody else getting attacked or whatever, versus do I want to make this a bigger mess that is just going to draw more people in? Finding that balance, and even just like what types of fights to engage in, because it just feels like so many of the attacks just seem so disingenuous. It just doesn't even feel worth engaging in, because it's like they're clearly not playing by any rules that mean anything to the rest of society. They're clearly just like the whole thing about basically taking someone's words and then reinterpreting them and conveying them like that. I've seen that happen a whole bunch, and it's just, if we're gonna play a game where you're not even actually using the words I'm using in this conversation, what's the point of even engaging with this? And so then the option is to just not engage. But then at what point does it's just like that frustrating point of, then it feels like you were saying, if somebody doesn't come back and respond, then it feels like then they got the last word in and they clearly won whatever winning is in this cesspool.
And that's not actually true.
When it's clearly not true. It's just at some point you're just like, I'm not engaging in this anymore, because this is not even, this conversation isn't real.
And it's not.
So much of their arguing is not grounded in reality or facts or what is actually happening.
No, I think the biggest example of this, and you mentioned this earlier, is them trying to reinterpret, and just because they say something doesn't mean it's true. I think this is the biggest example, is when they're like, oh, like McDonald's is not on the BDS boycott list. It's organic boycott target. It is on that paper. It is on their website. That if you have it or you promote it, you are breaking BDS committee's boycott.
And it's so funny with that one, because that one has just been a constant in the conversation. McDonald's specifically, constant in the conversation for months and months, because it wasn't just this recent thing. It was like it's been one of those things that's been like, it's across the board, just something we've all been like very clear. My 8-year-old knows we don't go to McDonald's. It's just and so to have that be like the gotcha, oh, just kidding, it's not actually on the BDS list.
It's reactionary. It's reactionary normalization. And anyone can perpetuate reactionary normalization in their moral code or non-existence thereof.
No, exactly. We're seeing, it's like the shift, we can talk about this, the shift of people saying we're only boycotting and following things on BDS, and then the moment something is actually on BDS and it's actually something in BDS themselves have said, this is an organic boycott it. The moment that happens, they're like, actually, we don't listen to BDS. It's invalid. Like, people trying to invalidate BDS's existence. That threw me for a loop, because these people were basically worshiping BDS before that. And now all of a sudden, oh, BDS isn't valid anymore. That's not how this works.
Yeah, it's like them just being like, anything related to BTS will never be on BDS list. Full confidence. And obviously that's not the case.
Right.
And now they're like, oh, who said that? Not me.
Even though we probably all have screenshots of them saying exactly that.
All documented.
This like reactionary normalization of it, where so many people think, oh, BTS will not be touched with this boycott, with the idea of divestment, when really you have to confront it. You have to confront the reality that Zionism is so intertwined with everything we do.
Yep.
And with all the things. So like, how do we divest? How do we speak up about it? Because I literally go to a university that funds arms and that is basically a school that teaches students who would then go on to work for these different companies that produce weapons and that produce technologies that actually facilitate genocide and that support the settler colony. Like, you have to confront all these realities about yourself and that you exist within. And that's hard for a lot of people to do.
Yeah, I think it is, because it takes them out of their comfort.
Yeah.
And they're confronting their own humanity and their own reality. And you see this with calls boycotts from BDS, and you see this with calls to boycott things connected with the UAE. Across the board, when marginalized people are asking people to boycott, it never fails to rub against the comfort bubble of a normalizer.
Yeah. And I think that's like the big thing. And I think that's what we're seeing a lot in Army Twitter is like that, the idea that just the realization that we have to give up some of our comfort in order for everyone to be a little more free.
Yeah.
And I think that is a really hard pill for a lot of people to swallow. It's just really hard. And I have some empathy. Yes, it's uncomfortable. And yes, we all need to sit with that discomfort. But then you need to work through it. And please don't take us all down with you while you're working through it. And please come out the other side a little better person. But it's really hard. And I think that some of what we've seen on Army Twitter is people not handling that well and not being able to make that transition from discomfort into being a better human being.
Yeah. And it's a pinnacle tenet of white supremacy culture is the right to comfort. And you find that in really individualistic societies, and you find that in largely consumerist societies. Western doesn't have to be. You see it a lot. Yeah, I think it's pretty cut and dry. It's confronting people's idealized white supremacist value of right to comfort.
Yeah, we see that a lot, especially with things like the boycott, right? And it's hard for some reason to get people to not spend money.
Which is baseline really wild to me.
Yeah.
You literally just don't have to spend money. That's baseline what we're asking here.
Everything's so expensive in this economy.
And it baffles me that people have such a strong reaction of you telling them like, hey, we're collectively boycotting this thing to support the Palestinian cause. Please join us. Because I remember having conversations with people I'm not friends with anymore because we can talk about this later, but like losing people and seeing people change. And these are people I thought were like my people or my community. These are the people that like I joined Army Twitter and I'm involved with them because we want to make a change in the music industry. We want to support BTS. We want to like, I talked about this before, but like anti-racism through music, right?
Yeah.
There's a lot of lenses you can look at BTS's music and their position in the music industry and Army's position as a really powerful fandom and how we can fight against a lot of the racism within music. But there's this one moment where it's like, yeah, we're all pro-Palestine. And I'm like, okay, I'm listening to Palestinians and what they ask of me and what they want from me. And I'm like, okay, I can do that. I'm not going to die if I don't buy an album. Okay. But there's a lot of Palestinian people who will die if money keeps getting funded to the genocide. Even if my purchase of this album is so indirect in the larger scope of Zionism and how Zionism is normalized, I want to do my little part in not normalizing that. So I'm not going to buy the album. I'm not going to buy that merch. I'm not going to do all that.
Yeah.
But it's like you like ask these people who thought who were your friends, who cared, who you thought you were in arms with, and they say no, and even they get angry at even the suggestion of that. How strange. Like, the boycott should be the least argued about thing when it comes to divestment in this movement. But for some reason, it's become the most argued point. And that to me is really kills me.
Yeah. Yeah. I think that on the subject of, losing people, I definitely am no stranger to that. Just being Palestinian and throughout my life, it's okay. But how much of my existence can you tolerate in your Zionist propaganda upbringing world? And it surprises me every single time. And it shouldn't, but it does. Disappointment in humanity. I think that every single flare up of this 100-year occupation and genocide of our people by these entities, every time it flares up, I'm like, oh, we lose more people. And then this aspect in particular in October, you stuck with me for this long and then still losing people because I've decided to continue to just exist as who I am and speak about what that looks like. And so I think people are getting a taste of that in Army Twitter spaces where they're losing people who they didn't think they would. And like you said, like it kills you. And I think that's very much what Palestinians feel about a lot of things. It's, oh yeah, we want to have trust and respect in humanity as Indigenous people and as people of humanity. We want to make that call in allyship and love. But yeah, continue to be let down. And I think that's letting down people in diaspora, yeah. But you're also letting down, again, the most marginalized in Gaza.
Yeah. As we're talking about this, like all of this is violence. And a lot of these people as well are really going against the actual message of BTS too. Like, I point out to Kate recently because I had an epiphany moment, which people have probably realized this before, but ARMY is an acronym, and it's adorable representative MC for the youth. And MC is a rap term that's talking about people who talk about the culture, talk about the actual struggle of the Black population through rap, through music. And MC is like such a like profound title that people like is bestowed upon people within rap. And I had an epiphany moment because I was thinking about how rap has come to the forefront with things like Kendrick Lamar recently. Even though he should talk about Palestine, he should speak about Palestine. Kendrick, drop it, please. Drop the statement.
Kendrick, who's clearly listening to this podcast.
Kendrick, drop the statement now.
Special guest Kendrick Lamar.
Special guest, actually. But it kills me that he hasn't spoken up about Palestine at all either. That kind of kills me. But MC is like this like important title that's bestowed upon people, and us being called ARMY, like being MCs for the youth, it's so fundamentally within just the existence of ARMY. Palestine should be something we're not arguing about it. That makes sense. We're advocating like with Palestinians for a free and liberated Palestine. That is a no-brainer. That is like something we're not going to argue about. But people do. And we see that especially with things like the lyric bots. Yeah. Zuzu, you want to talk about that? Do you want to go on with that?
Yeah, thank you. I think that the biggest thing that we've observed, and especially like I've observed on kind of time, is the lyric bots being really both posting very within their character and then posting not out of character, breaking the fourth wall and sharing their views in solidarity with the Palestinian people and occupied and genocided people. And I think that's a really big deal, thinking about, okay, these are people who have dedicated accounts to analyze the lyrics of our songwriters. So RM lyrics, so Namjoon's lyrics, such a profound writer in this space he is, and other lyric bots as well. But I think this one particularly sticks with me because Namjoon's lyrics are so profound, and he obviously wants to tell his craft, his stories, and he's so intelligent with that, as we all know. And the person who cared enough about those lyrics of his, who cared enough to lovingly craft a lyric bot to share their favorite lyrics from this man's pen, is also in solidarity with us as the Palestinian people. And that's absolutely not a coincidence.
Yeah. Yeah, I'll just add on to that to say that I agree. I've seen that with like Jungi lyrics too.
Sure,
right? Like,
sure.
yeah. And I've seen, I just to add to that conversation, I've seen a lot of creatives in the space who just spend their time understanding and analyzing and being steeped in BTS lyrics and art and so on. And those are the folks that that are like, of course we're for Palestine. And I was thinking about this, and especially in conjunction with the conversation we were just having, where when I had a bunch of people canceling me and being like, wow, we're not friends anymore because you spoke up about this on Twitter, I was having this moment where in my bio, it literally says something about dismantling systemic oppression. Like, it's literally in my bio.
Yeah.
And I'm like, that's what I'm just like, it's literally in my bio. If you all of a sudden are thinking this is the line that I shouldn't be crossing, I'm like, you really should never have been here in the first place. And I like, and it goes back to that kind of the idea of, yes, army in theory, perhaps not always in practice, clearly. But army is this like representative of social justice. That's how we've always portrayed ourselves. And so, yeah, I like all of this kind of, to me, those are the pieces that make sense. Of course, the lyric bots are going to be pro-Palestine because the lyrics clearly fit this messaging and it clearly maps into everything else we do. And just like dealing with the anti-boycott side of things, just like thinking about how it's almost like scratching your head, like, how did you get to that conclusion that is the appropriate way to approach this when it just feels like this message and idea that we're here to represent social justice and a better future and a better world for the youth. Like, what, for me as someone who's slightly older, it's what kind of world do I want to leave for my kids?
Yeah.
What kind of world do I want to leave for those coming up behind me? And what can I do to make that better future? What steps can I take? And it feels like these are the pieces that make sense. It's really interesting to me, again, and I think it goes back to, it's okay, yeah, I can play this game of being this rebel and pushing back against the man and doing this kind of whatever, the bad boy army feeling of, oh, I'm so outside the norm because I'm buying out tickets for a Trump rally or whatever the heck we were like all excited about in 2020. And then when it comes to actually disrupting your own comfort or disrupting like that safe space you've garnered for yourself in order to actually do the things that matter, that's when it all falls apart. Because I think for a lot of people, it was more the game of being army rather than it being an actual core tenet of people's identities.
Yeah. I also want to share, to put it out into the universe, because you mentioned what kind of world you want to leave your children, and us being the representatives for youth, that half of Gaza's population, over half of Gaza's population, is children, youth under 18. And so many of those youth have been martyred. So can we be the representatives for those youth as well? Do they matter as well? And yes, they do.
The answer is yes. Just to be clear, there was no other choice in that.
Correct. There's a quote by James Baldwin. It says, "The children are ours everywhere." And I think of, in conjunction with the poem, O Rascal Children of Gaza.
Yep.
And I think about their life and their blooming and their playfulness. And that's our youth as well. It's the same. And like we said earlier, like, everyone in the struggle is human. That's obviously no denying that. And we're all just coming together. And I think it's really great to assess your social location and be like, okay, yes, we are Army. We are the representatives for youth. What does that mean when there's real action people could be taken for the youth of a population, and then you step back and you're like, oh, not that youth though. Just something to point out too.
Yeah.
From your point, Kate.
Yeah. I think about that a lot, especially when we see pushback online. And I've seen this from people who I thought I knew really well. Clearly didn't know as well as I thought. And again, it's like the ex-friends. Yeah, we were friends at one point.
Yeah.
Clearly not anymore. Clearly I was mistaken in where we were located in our relationship. Where they enjoy the play of ARMY. They enjoy the play of being on Twitter and playing as ARMY. And I get that it's great. It's a wonderful way to have a break. It's a wonderful way, like, for mental health and community, whatever. But to that same point, it's so why is your play and where you're situated, why does that get privilege here?
Yeah.
Like, why are you more important than those kids?
Yeah.
And yet in that poem, The Rascal Children, God, that just gets me. I tear up every time I think about that poem.
Yeah. And I think a lot of people do, because they see themselves as children and they also see their own children.
I see my kids every time. It's,
Yeah.
Every time.
Yeah.
And Kate cries on the podcast.
Okay.
It's all right.
Yeah. Crying is healthy. It's okay to cry. I think
Yeah.
it's hard, especially because, like, I don't have kids.
Yeah.
But when I think of that type of quote, I think of the children too, where I have a lot of, like, younger cousins, baby cousins, and just even as someone who, like, doesn't really want kids, it's like children are our future. Children are the holders of the future, are the ones who will pass on the stories. I think we talk so much of death, and so many people have died, but in kind of the light of that, it's like there's so many stories that so many children get to pass on, and those stories will be kept alive. We're not going to die off. I say this as someone from a dying culture, from a dying language. We're going to keep going. We're not going to die off. No matter how much the colonial powers try to kill us, we will continue living. And I think it's really beautiful to think about that and how that's intertwined with children and childhood.
Yeah. Yeah, I appreciate that. That's how I think about us too. Settler colony wants to eradicate the Palestinian people from the face of this earth, and they go for our children. They know how many children are in Gaza. And to fight against, a dying people, things like perceived to be like dying language, dying culture, all of these things that indigenous people all around the world are trying to hold on to in Asia, in Africa, on Turtle Island. It's so evident that we have to hold our children in our hearts like this, and not make judgment of expectation on them. It's like our goal for liberation is to let our children be liberated themselves without the expectation of, that's our duty now, so that the children don't have to. And I think that it's so that they can be the holders of the stories, because I do think it's everyone's goal to be the holders of the stories. And we have to be alive to do that. And I think that as we talk about the profoundness of words, of lyrics, coming back to that, it's all what comes back to it. Like, we as humans tell stories. We are representatives of those stories as fans of music, of fans of poets and film and the arts and storytellers. And Indigenous people tell oral histories. Like, all of this is so interconnected. The profoundness of conscientious ARMY devotion to lyrics is the same amount of care that people are passing down oral traditions and histories and stories. because those words have meaning. They make meaning to the art and to society. And I think that's what gets me of the profoundness of this all, is that, of course, people who hold words, spoken word in particular, not written, as profound, of course, those are people who are striving for liberation. To tie it all back. Yeah.
Yeah. And with us talking about this, just striving for liberation and the future and our hopes, what do we hope for the future? Yeah. What do you guys think about that?
To all of my Palestinian friends and family and beloved ones, all of the Hawaiian, I create very simple scenes in my imagination about, oh, what does it look like when we're allowed to go back, when we're able to go back to Palestine? What does that look like? And it's honoring the struggle it takes to get there. But I think hope is so important, and hope in very simple things. So it's, yeah, I talk about picking fruit with my sister. I talk about getting to like actually drive or some other form of transportation from the river to the sea. I think of that. I think of all of the beautiful land that is ours and the food that is ours and the people. I think about being a family, being like Palestinian Christian, and sharing space and neighborhood with like my Palestinian Muslim neighbors, and like how simple but good that is for the future. I think it's so helpful for us and our community, Palestinian armies in particular, and gives like Palestinian armies that have had to leave home. Talking about these things, they're not like something that we're like, oh, and we're gonna do this and this. Like sometimes, yes, but it's more like it feels nostalgic in the fact that it's our ancestors have done this before and we'll do it again. And that feels so lovely to share in this specifically like Palestinian army community, to be like, oh, we connect by so many simple things. So we can have a future where we do that, not apart, but where we all live together. Yeah. But the more near future, I don't know. I think I always come back to, we continue to be loud. We're going to keep on fighting. Army for Palestine is in it for the long haul. We're dedicated to doing our best by our people and just continuing to do that, and doing that in a way that's sustainable for us as well. But as we learn and as very real life things happen to us and our families, and figuring out what that looks like. And I don't know, it's very much, we're going to be here. We're going to be here still. And we just hope for new exciting things and different campaigns and fundraisers in this movement. And we just hope you'll stick with us.
I feel like we both agree with that image of the future. Like when you started talking about being able to road trip from the river to the sea, I was like, oh, it's like you get to do things like that your ancestors did, that people have done.
Yeah.
And it's just, oh my God, it's like longing for something that used to be and that will be eventually. It's just like in this temporary moment. It's not there yet, but it'll be there. And I don't know, like I feel like the same way. We're in the long haul for this. This isn't just a temporary thing, which I think a lot of people, I had this weird interaction on Twitter where I was talking about boycotting, and this one person was like, oh, how long are you gonna boycott for? And I was like, until we get a free and liberated Palestine. Hello. I'm not gonna stop boycotting. And they were like, oh, and they were very obviously anti-boycott, like Zionist compliant person. And they were like, oh, I respect you at least for doing that. And I'm thinking in my head, like, why you then? Why this is like, I don't know if you got some weird cognitive dissonance going on, but why aren't you? is just what a strange thing to say to me. Be like totally against me, but being like, oh, I respect you at least for doing it. And I'm like, do you? It's just like stuff like that. It's I'm gonna fight for this future.
Yeah.
We're gonna fight for it.
Yeah.
It's not gonna be overnight. But I don't know. I talked to this in a past podcast episode too. Like comparatively, where the pro liberation movement has been in the past 20 years, we have sprinted the past couple months. Okay. I'm a politics person, so I've been seeing the polling numbers of how people went from like 20-30% being in support of a ceasefire to now like over 50% of Americans saying they want a ceasefire when it comes to political surveys. And I feel like we're not seeing it sometimes, like seeing our successes and seeing our victories, but there is so much success and victory. There is so much change that is happening. And I'm so hopeful that like we're gonna see a liberated Palestine in our lifetime.
Yeah.
We will.
Yeah.
And we're manifesting. We're not just manifesting, we're gonna actualize it. It's gonna happen.
Yeah. Inshallah.
Exactly.
And that's the ultimate.
Yeah. And with all of that, we come to our final thoughts. We're gonna go Kate, me, and then we're gonna end with our lovely Zuzu. Kate, would you like to start us off with some final thoughts?
Yeah, final thoughts. First, I'd like to applaud the listeners who made it through this whole episode. Congratulations. I'm sure this was a lot for the listeners in a good way, hopefully. I think for me, I just want to end with my thought of, I think I am most appreciative of, out of all of this, everything that's happened. And I know we talked a lot about a lot of really heavy stuff in this episode. And in this episode and other episodes, we've talked about some of the more negative things that have happened in this Twitterverse there and other spaces. But I feel really honored to be in community here. And I think that it's just being able to have this community space and do this community building with all of you has been deeply impactful for me and my life. And I think that despite all the toxic garbage that has been happening on Army Twitter and other places, I think that being able to do this sort of work and be in community in this way I deeply appreciate it, and I feel honored that I get to be a part of this. And so that I'll just leave that on that note.
I'm also very grateful to be here. I think about this very often where it's like I'm Hmong, and the Hmong people, we don't have anything to return to anymore. We have been effectively, in a lot of ways, our people have been genocided. Even though my existence is resistance and other Hmong people existing and preserving our culture is resistance, but we have been genocided and pushed out of our homeland very effectively by different colonial powers and different governments. Yeah. But being able to be here and be able to fight with Palestinians for liberated Palestine, it gives me so much hope and so much love and so much care, because there's a lot of people who did fail, like the Hmong people, and who, like, we did get genocided and our culture is dying, but there's other people I can fight for and other people I can fight with to preserve their culture, to ensure that this type of stuff never happens ever again. And to me, that's exciting. That gives me hope. That gives me so much love. And that fills me with so much just strength to know that, okay, this bad stuff might have happened to my people, but we can stop it from happening to other people. And we can learn from what has happened to us and help others. It brings me a lot of hope that marginalized people around the world, like, we are united against oppression, we're united against white supremacy, we're united against colonialism. And no one's going to break that away. No one. Not even bad actors or malicious people. No one's going to break that away. Yeah. Sending you so much love, Zuzu. All you.
Thank you. My turn for final thoughts. Oh, yeah. I just want to express gratitude for the invitation to come on to share community with you all, particularly in person, and just like share that community and do really important work with you, both with all of you guys. Yeah, I want to share Final thoughts on just we, the entity of Army for Palestine and the Hive Divestment Movement and our collective movement. It's not centered on any individual. It's about, it's about us as a whole entity, and it's about us just being together and solidarity. And we're so grateful to everyone who has supported us and joined our cause. We couldn't do this without amazing friends and people who are like family along the way. I just want to give a huge shout out for the Army for Palestine team, just some of the most incredible people that I have ever had the pleasure to be in community with in my life, to especially my Hayatis on the admin team. I love them so much. They'll forever be in my life, inshallah. To all of you listening, all of this, who this may reach, just want to ask you to continue supporting our movement, continue supporting Army for Palestine. I plug that we recently launched our TikTok and Instagram this week, so please go follow us. We're trying to expand platforms with a lot of support from our friends on those platforms. OOB, Operation Olive Branch, big shout out to them. Yeah, we're expanding from Twitter. We're continuing to fight in new and exciting ways. So please continue to support us. Please continue to support our movements, particularly our fundraisers. Those are the most important things to plug and just keep fighting for our people. Because I think that this has been such an honor to be able to liaison for Army for Palestine and to be a part of this team. I'm grateful that and humbled to be given the responsibility to speak in this space. And I'm really grateful, and I'm just ready to be more and more radical. I'm ready to be more and more in community with people who are ready for that fight, and to listen to others, and to be in a community of love and respect, and just keep moving forward. And just, I'm ready. And I hope everyone else is too.
And we are.
We so are.
Let's go. All right. That has been this episode. Thank you so much, Zuzu, for coming and speaking and being iconic and having these conversations with us that have been really important and really meaningful as well.
Mhm.
And sending gratefulness, sending love to the people of Palestine out there.
Yeah.
And we're going to continue fighting. We're going to stay. We're going to fight. It's a long haul. Literally, I'm not leaving. I'm stuck here now. But with
love.
Yeah.
Shukran.
Yeah. But thank you all so much for listening. Everyone, please take care of yourselves. Please feel free to look at all the resources linked in the description. We'll have Army for Palestine's fundraisers, their Instagram, their TikTok, and we'll have a bunch of other information you can look through there. So thank you so much, everyone. Please continue to educate yourself. Please continue to fight. And that's about it. Yep. Bye.
Free Palestine.
Yeah.